Live from KPFK studios in Los Angeles, this is your KPFK People's News for September 1st, 2015.
I'm Linda Hernandez.
And I'm Adam Rice.
It wasn't just them doing it, but it was their families outside that started organizing through California. Families to a man's solitary confinement that really took on the baton and fought for their loved ones.
In a historical settlement, the state of California agrees to end the practice of solitary confinement.
Immigration police arrest hundreds of immigrants for alleged criminal behavior.
A coalition of activists descends on the LA Police Commission to reject attempts to limit their freedom of speech.
Details of these and more this edition of KPFK People's News. I'm Linda Hernandez.
And I'm Adam Rice.
Stay with us.
In California today, a settlement was reached in a class action suit that ends solitary confinement in all state prisons. Subject to court approval, the agreement will result in a dramatic reduction in the number of people in solitary across the state, and a new program that could be a model for other states going forward. This class action was brought in 2012 on behalf of prisoners held in solitary confinement at Pelican Bay. The plaintiffs argued that the prison isolated prisoners often without any violent or serious conduct infractions, often for more than a decade. The litigants argued that California's use of prolonged solitary confinement constitutes cruel and unusual punishment and denies prisoners their rights to due process. Alex Sanchez is the director of Homies Unidos, an organization that works with at-risk youth to help them better their lives.
I believe that the Department of Corrections fell under the pressure not only of what the President Obama has been saying on the national level in regards to his visit he did in Oklahoma, but also primarily because of the hunger strike that was for 59 days that the inmates in Pelican Bay took on, in which originally it was 30,000 inmates that took part of it throughout California. This self-sacrifice brought the attention of a nation. And it wasn't just them doing it, but it was their families outside that started organizing through California, families to a man's solitary confinement that really took on the baton and fought for their loved ones, that really put the pressure in Sacramento. Every time they went to lobby, it was full buses of people that went up there to voice out their concerns and the right that they had to just touch their loved ones. And I think that was the critical moment in all of this. Obviously the effort of many of the attorneys that have been part of the struggle for many years that never gave up on us, some of them not getting paid a cent. So we really have a lot of thank yous to go around, but we can't thank CDCR. They fell to the pressure of the families. They fell to the pressure of a community. They fell to the national pressure that was on this human rights violation tactic that they was using in our backyard.
The removal of prisoners from isolation does not put an end to what the United Nations characterizes as torture. It merely modifies certain behavior towards the prisoners, such as isolation for alleged or suspected ties with gangs.
It's been a constant struggle. We and the attorneys have told us that we were on the right path, that what we were fighting for was legally on our side, but it was an issue of CDCR actually continue the enforcement of this policy to segregate people based on what they believe was information or credible information by individuals that were not credible at all. So it was a challenge to do it, but the pressure was on. We had the rapporteur from the UN come over and say that it was unconstitutional to keep somebody longer than 15 days, and not even that really changed their mentality. It's been a constant struggle for almost 4 years to change that. And so we knew that it was a long fight. It's been a long fight. The families have been suffering and dealing with this for many, many years, but I've seen the joy of many of these families once they were able to touch their loved one, feel them, and just be able to talk to them without any glass windows or or none at all. It was difficult, but we couldn't have done it without the attorneys. The Center of Constitutional Law has been really fighting for this, full steam ahead, and the pressure that the families put on was really what they needed to really voice out in the community what they were fighting for their loved ones inside.
Today, Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti's Police Commission agendized the limiting of the Brown Act. The Brown Act was passed in 1953, and it guarantees the public's right to attend and participate in meetings of local legislative bodies. A coalition of activists held a press conference outside LAPD headquarters before going into the meeting. The coalition was made of all blood, race, colors, and creeds wishing to keep their freedom of speech. Leading the country with the most number of police murders anywhere in the United States, many Angelenos are realizing that politics and policing tactics are intertwined with the isms of societal woes. The frustration of the crowd was felt as speaker by speaker listed each one of the panelists by name, insisting that they be fired. The momentum of this drastic increase in community involvement is in the light of the recent police murders. Iselle Ford in December and Rendell Jones in August. The crowd repeated the name of Rendell Jones, whose family was notified 13 days after she was shot in the back by police on August 12th. One of the attendees is Los Angeles Community Action Network's co-director Pete White.
The second matter we were there on today is the movement by the Police Commission to attempt to infringe upon the free speech right of people attending public meetings. And so they sent out their own little manifesto that described the type of speech that would not be tolerated in the police commission. And much of that, they talked about profanity, they talked about stomping feet and chanting. Much of that is protected activity in the First Amendment. And even more so, Brown Act already has provisions in it which allows them to remove those who are, in fact, disrupting a meeting. And so we were there to say to them, instead of spending all of your time trying to figure out how to silence voices of opposition, you should instead be addressing the items and the issues, namely the murder of black people, that bring people to these chambers in the first place.
Aquí estoy, vengo a pegarte, voy a buscarte. Me llamo justicia, no vas a escaparte. Vas a frustrarte cuando la revolución te aplaste. Y no puedo calmarme porque a mujeres inocentes golpeaste. Ancianos y estudiantes golpeaste.
The LA County Board of Supervisors voted on two important jail plans today. The first was the approval of a $2 billion plan to build a 3,885-bed replacement for the downtown Men's Central Jail and a new women's jail in Lancaster. And the second was the creation of a new Office of Diversion and Reentry aiming at diverting at least 1,000 people from jail to treatment programs over the next 2 years. Juan from the Youth Justice Coalition was there.
It wasn't a good day. They passed the expansion where over 3,800 beds at Men's Central will be provided, and also a new women's jail in Mariloma, which is far from the families, makes it far more expensive for families to travel to see their loved ones, which wasn't a success. They didn't discuss anything in regards to like bail reduction or other alternatives. It was just jail, which we know is not getting to the grassroots problem. I don't think that is that they're scared to lose any money, it's just that they don't want to invest it because of how politics are played.
In California, the immigration police reported on Monday that more than 240 people were taken into federal custody last week across Southern California. The authorities said that the 4-day sweep was conducted for immigrants with allegedly criminal records living in the country illegally. According to the official story, many of the detainees had at least one felony conviction on their record. Philip Aguirre is an immigration attorney with offices in Maywood, California.
I think this is part of the same issue, the ongoing war on immigrants. They have no reason to deport people. From what I heard, even legal residents are being deported, and this is really, really surprising. In reality, it's a war against all poor people. It doesn't matter what country they're from. The issue that they're trying to target the immigrants right now is very deplorable. We are the ones that have basically made the economy of this country function, and they shouldn't be targeting people. They are acting as a judge, jury, and executioner. Those officers are acting as police officers under the law that President Clinton signed in 1997. The law basically makes any immigration officer the same as a judge in immigration court. They make a decision about deporting somebody and they're gone. They basically criminalize, the migratory trends in the United States. That is what's going on. It's a question of people of color, poor people from the Philippines and Asian countries are the ones that are targeted for deportation. And that's the reality. Those are the people that are basically holding up the economy of this country. So if Donald Trump's wet dreams were to come true, the economy of California and many other states, even New York, where he is based at, would most likely be negatively affected. I want to know who are the people that are building his hotels. Those are the people that are basically holding up the economy. Has anybody ever done an investigation of Mr. Trump's holdings and the people that he hires to see the hypocrisy? Yeah, I think that the main thing was like what the anchor from Univision said the other day in front of Mr. Trump. No human being is illegal. There's no such thing as an illegal human being. People may not have documents, but that does not make them legal or illegal. They are not criminals per se by being here without legal documents. So I think that's the issue. If you accept the question of legality and illegality, then we're talking about a thing that's totally lost. I think we have to look at the issues, in terms of how people are, who they work, and who are the ones that basically live off the work of immigrant labor.
The agency says that among the people captured, 191 nationals were from Mexico and the rest were from 21 other countries including France, Ghana, Peru, and Thailand. Although they highlighted that a majority of them had convictions for violent felonies such as weapons charges or sex abuse charges, it turned out that the alleged criminal behavior included mostly misdemeanors and driving under the influence.
Yes, including Donald Trump's mother, who was born in Scotland. Her son was born in the United States, so he's an anchor baby himself. Like I said, there's no such thing as an illegal human being. People may be here without documents, but that does not make them illegal. The way that these terms are being used about, they're really very racist, and they're basically made to categorize and put us in a lesser position as human beings. If they can denigrate and take away your humanity, then they have won.
¿Cómo se llama el sistema excluyente? ¿Cómo se llama? Capitalismo.
For KPFK in Los Angeles, I'm Don DeBar with some news from around the world and around the nation. A UN agency report issued Tuesday predicts that what it described as the less-than-human living conditions in Gaza will make the Palestinian enclave potentially uninhabitable by 2020. That warning comes from the UN Trade and Development Agency, UNCTAD, in its report into the Palestinian economy. In addition to the severe crises linked to water and electricity shortages, the UN agency said that Gaza's 1.8 million residents have yet to recover from the destruction of last year's attacks by Israel. Deanne Penn filed this report.
3 wars in 6 years and 8 years of economic blockade have been blamed for terrible living conditions in the occupied Palestinian territory, the UN Trade and Development Agency, UNCTAD, said Tuesday. In its latest report on Gaza and the West Bank, UNCTAD experts warn that development is not merely hindered, but reversed. In fact, the figures show that for the first time since 2006, the Palestinian economy has gone into recession. The conflict in 2014 was particularly damaging, with whole areas of Gaza still flattened by attacks, so says UNCTAD's Mahmoud El-Kafif.
The fact that electricity is not enough, the fact that a number of hospitals has been distracted, the fact is that there is no drinking water enough. It's just for any rational human being would be able to deduct what's going to happen. I mean, we had a study before the destruction of 2014 indicating that Gaza won't be livable in 2020. It's not that things have stayed as they were in 2012, but they got much, much worse in 2014.
Israel is criticized for withholding almost $700 million of import tax revenue from the Palestinian authorities in the first 4 months of the year. According to the UN agency, it's the 6th time Israel has withheld the money since 1997, which are far and away the main source of public revenue in the West Bank and Gaza. In another sign of the deteriorating conditions on the ground, UNCTAD said that in the year 2000, 72,000 people depended on food aid, but now that number has risen to almost 1 million. And in Gaza, unemployment is as high as 80%, the UN agency added. Deanne Penn, United Nations.
As we reported earlier, deadly clashes erupted outside the parliament building in Kiev, Ukraine Monday between police and crowds of protesters who oppose amendments to the Constitution providing for the decentralization of the country, particularly the breakaway eastern provinces. Washington applauded the Kiev government for using police to put an end to the violence. That was not their line during the Maidan protests, when masses of protesters throwing Molotov cocktails and shooting at police drove the elected president from the country in fear of his family's lives. This was then State Department spokesperson Marie Harf during the Maidan protests.
We will continue to consider additional steps, as I said, including sanctions in response to the use of violence. We continue to urge President Yanukovych and his government to protect the democratic rights of all Ukrainians, including the rights of peaceful protest. And if we have to take additional steps, we will.
RT's Guyan Chichikayan tried to get an explanation from U.S. State Department spokesperson Mark Toner Monday.
2 years ago, the message that came from the U.S. was more clear and less murky, and that it was to urge the government at the time not to use force, even though some of the same groups who came out to the parliament on Monday threw Molotov cocktails at the police and so on and so forth. Why should the approach to these nationalist groups be different now as opposed to 2 years ago?
I think we can all agree that the Maidan was largely a people-led, peaceful demonstration, remarkably so, given the months and months that many of the people were out in the Maidan. Our message is that if you want to peacefully protest, and let me finish, peacefully protest, then the obligation on the part of law enforcement is that they should respect that right.
2 years ago, are you saying that it was all peaceful? Was there violence coming only
this
from
is the
one
last
side?
thing I'm going to say about it. I said, I can't speak to every incident that took place on the Maidan, but by and large, yes, it was a dignified, peaceful protest on behalf of the Ukrainian people.
Did you see footage
in the back,
of
please?
rioters throwing Molotov cocktails?
I answered the question. Please go ahead. I answered the question.
Analyst Roger Annis, editor of The New Cold War, speaking with RT Monday, explained why the State Department spokesperson was being, at a minimum, disingenuous in his response.
In fact, there's a growing body of evidence that researchers into the events on Maidan Square are showing that there was extreme violence practiced by the right-wing forces that were driving to overthrow the elected president at the time, and specifically the use of sniper fire on February 20th. There's now considerable evidence, including in the official investigation ongoing in Ukraine itself, that the sniper fire that was blamed on the police of the government that was overthrown, in fact, came from the right-wing side, and so that the right-wing side practices violence is no mystery to anyone. But perhaps these latest events in Kyiv will give more impetus to a real and serious investigation into the extremely violent events on Maidan Square on February 20th and in the days and weeks leading up to that.
Amid ongoing fighting in Yemen, the UN raised the alarm Tuesday over the steep rise in the number of civilian casualties and the deteriorating humanitarian situation there. In the southern city of Taiz, the Human Rights Office, OHCHR, said that 95 civilians had been killed in the past 2 weeks alone. The UN office said that 53 of those reportedly died as a result of airstrikes by Saudi Arabia. Daniel Johnson filed this report from the UN in Geneva.
Following a spike in civilian deaths in Yemen in recent weeks, the UN Human Rights Office, OHCHR, said that one city has seen nearly 100 civilians killed in just 2 weeks. That city is Taiz in the south of the country. There, more than half of the victims died from aerial bombardments directed by Saudi-led coalition forces at Houthi rebels, OHCHR said. All the while, the humanitarian situation is as dire as ever in Yemen. Since the escalation of the armed conflict on the 26th of March, OHCHR has documented more than 2,100 civilian deaths, though the actual numbers are believed to be much higher. Daniel Johnson, United Nations, Geneva.
Monday saw the outgoing president of the UN Security Council, Nigeria's permanent representative, Ambassador Uche Joy Agwu, close her August term with a summary of the Council's work. This month, as heads of state from around the world gather at UN headquarters in New York for the opening session of this year's General Assembly, the Security Council presidency will fall to Russia's permanent representative, Vitaly Churkin. He outlined some of the challenges before the council, particularly in the Middle East and North Africa, where he noted conflicts have created a mass migration of refugees.
Madam President, this month we worked quite well. We paid a lot of attention to the Middle East and North Africa. The situation there, unfortunately, leaves a lot to be desired. The region is in a zone of instability, conflicts are ubiquitous and bloody, and the prospects for them being resolved looks doubtful. In August, we, as is our custom, talked about the situation in the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. The lack of resolution there maintains a risk of growth of tension and radicalization. Uncertainty regarding the Gaza Strip is worsened by a lack of intra-Palestinian unity. Unfortunately, the situation in Libya remains very serious. As a gross violation of the Security Council resolutions of the Security Council by members of the Council, these violations are having a significant impact, and there are new tragedies. There's now a wave of migrants who are trying to leave the chaos of Libya to get to the shores of Europe, despite the cautious optimism that the Special Representative of the Secretary General, Bernardino Leon, talked about regarding the prospects of work on the political agreement. There are lots of causes for concern. At the moment, the state is continuing to fall apart, and this is used by terrorist organizations, including ISIS. They are continuing to expand their presence in Libya. We discussed in detail Yemen, where armed challenges are underway, and armed clashes rather underway, and the humanitarian situation is serious. Practically every day, civilians die. According to a report, yesterday, the airstrikes killed about 13 civilians. There is no light at the end of the tunnel as yet. We are decisively in favor of a swift end to the bloodshed. We would urge parties to display a constructive spirit at the negotiations under the aegis of the envoy Ismail Ahmed. An important place in the work of the Council is Syria. We are pleased that we managed to adopt a number of important documents, including the PRST on Syria, urging Syrians to swiftly include in the diplomatic efforts, swiftly involved in the diplomatic efforts of the Special Envoy Staffan de Mistura. On the 7th of August, we adopted Resolution 2235 that set up the Joint Investigative Mechanism of Syria. This, as we hope, will work professionally and impartially. This is particularly important given the fact that, as we have seen work on this in the Security Council, some members of the Security Council are prepared to ignore terrorists just in pursuing their own political aims. The international community has to have the Security Council playing a key role, and then it can agree upon measures to curb the growth of the conflict potential in the area. On the 30th of September, we're planning to hold an open session at the ministerial level on the maintenance of peace and security, the resolution of conflict in the Middle East and Northern Africa. Following that, we're planning to have a PRST, which would focus on the urgency of measures to resolve and bring an end to conflicts in the Middle East and North Africa, and also would reflect possible steps to end the terrorist risk in the region. We are banking on broad involvement and support by member states of the UN. We are convinced that the pertinence of this has been confirmed by the work of the Council in August, when we tried to solve very slowly the Middle Eastern problem. This experience has shown that it is only possible to improve the region using a comprehensive approach, firmly rooted in international law and based on the prerogatives of the Security Council of the UN. In conclusion, Madam, I'd like to express my gratitude to all members of the Security Council who expressed their support for the upcoming Russian presidency in September. Thank you.
For KPFK, I'm Don DeBar.
This Monday, hundreds gathered in Leimert Park in Los Angeles to honor the transition of community leader, teacher, and longtime KPFK programmer Didan Kamathi. Among the crowd of friends and family who had come to hold vigil for this great spirit was our own Sister Charlene Muhammad. she sent this tribute in honor of our fallen brother.
It's hard to put D-Don's transition in words at this point. It's always very challenging and difficult to capture someone's life.
Brother was always righteous, always steadfast, and I think Brother Harold Welton stated it best when he said, forward forever, backwards never. And when I think about D-Don, that's what comes to mind.
Beyond being the revolutionary, beyond being the community activist, it was the person who kept a stash of money in his car every day for any and every homeless person he saw. He took time to make sure everybody got something to eat that day.
I believe I met D-Don probably around 1982 or 83. Not exactly sure, like so many other people. He just was there, and he was there forever after that.
I'm stronger today, and I'm going to push forward stronger and harder because of him as well. So I just feel honored and blessed to have been in his presence.
There is none other like Brother D-Don Kamathi. He was always for the people. He was always with the people. He was always concerned about the people, not black people, not indigenous people, not white people, but righteous people. He was for the cause of right wherever it was, and we will definitely miss Brother D-Don Kamathi. Ready for the revolution. I'm Sister Charlene Muhammad.
We at KPFK News would like to thank Brother D-Don Kamathi for all the spirit and joy he has shared with us over these years. We wish him well in his journey to the ancestors, and will treasure the peace of his spirit that he has left in all of us. Because of his strength, wisdom, and guidance, all of us here stand ready for the revolution. This concludes this edition of the KPFK People's News.
Special thanks to all the members of our collective for their contribution to this program, and to you, the listener, for making this newscast possible. This is Linda Hernandez.
And I'm Adam Rice.
Thank you for listening.
I don't know if they'll put poor people to work. That never really works out. In reality, it's a war against all poor people. It doesn't matter what country they're from. The issue that they're trying to target the immigrants right now is very deplorable. We are the ones that have basically made the economy of this country function, and they shouldn't be targeting people who... Yes, those officers are acting under the law that President Clinton signed in 1997. The law basically makes any immigration officer the same as a judge in immigration court. They make a decision about deporting somebody and they're gone. They basically criminalized, the migratory.
Welcome to Freedom Now, a Saturday Pan-African and Internationalist public affairs program directed to providing you, our global listening audience, another point of view. Freedom Now.